What if I told you that Zambia's biggest budget in history, over K253 billion kwacha, may not be what it seems? On paper, President Hakainde Hichilema calls it a people's budget, a plan to grow the economy, reduce debt, and bring hope to millions. But away from the speeches and celebrations, dark questions are rising. Where is all this money really going? Why are certain figures being hidden from the public eye? And why is the Lungu family, Zambia's most powerful political dynasty, suddenly worried about its wealth, its businesses, and its political survival? Some insiders say this is more than just a budget. It's a strategy. A tool designed to tighten control, shift power, and make sure old rivals like the Lungu family never rise again. So tonight, we go beyond the headlines and reveal the untold story of Zambia's K253 billion gamble, and why it could reshape the nation's politics forever. Welcome to InspirAfrica Official, where we uncover Africa's biggest political stories and hidden truths. In this special report, we break down Zambia's 2026 national budget, a record-breaking K253 billion kwacha plan announced by President Hakainde Hichilema. Government supporters are calling it bold and visionary. But critics warn it hides more than it reveals. We'll explore what this budget really means for Zambia's economy, why it has triggered whispers of fear in the Lungu family, and how it could affect the country's fragile balance of power as 2026 elections draw near. Is this budget truly a path to prosperity, or is it a calculated move to weaken rivals and consolidate power? Stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers, the politics, and the fears shaping Zambia's future. The budget bombshell. What if I told you that Zambia's biggest budget in history, K253 billion, may not be what it seems? President Hakainde Hichilema stood tall as he presented it, promising progress, growth, and hope. But behind the clapping in parliament, lies a set of numbers that could change Zambia's destiny forever. At first glance, the budget looks like a triumph. Billions for education, healthcare, roads, and energy. A vision of a modern Zambia. A nation ready to rise. But here's the catch, where will all this money come from? And that's the part no one wants to talk about. Because while HH spoke of prosperity, he left something out. Zambia is still chained to debt. Foreign lenders. Harsh conditions. And repayment schedules that hang over Lusaka like a storm cloud. So, is this really Zambia's budget, or a plan already written in Washington, Beijing, and London? But here's where the story gets darker. Buried inside this K253 billion plan are allocations that whisper of power struggles. Funds that could empower allies. Cuts that could quietly punish rivals. And programs that, to the Lungu family, look more like political traps than national reforms. Why? Because some of these funds may revive old corruption probes, reopening wounds from Edgar Lungu's presidency. And that means the budget isn't just about money, it's about control. For ordinary Zambians, it sparks new fears. Will this budget bring real jobs, cheaper food, and relief from the cost of living? Or will it just fuel the same elites who've always fed off state coffers? And yet, the question refuses to go away. Did HH just announce the boldest step towards Zambia's future, or did he quietly walk the nation into a deal that will haunt it for decades? Because what comes next could shake not only the ruling party, but the entire balance of power in Zambia. Stay with us, because in the next episode, The Silent Cuts, we'll uncover how hidden sacrifices inside this budget may hit ordinary Zambians the hardest, and why the truth is buried in the fine print. The silent cuts. On the surface, Zambia's K253 billion budget looks generous. Education funding rises. Healthcare gets more attention. Infrastructure projects promise jobs. It feels like a government finally putting people first. But when you peel back the layers, the truth is chilling. Because for every sector that shines, another quietly bleeds. Hidden deep in the fine print are cuts that most Zambians will never notice, until they feel the pain. Take healthcare. Yes, money is allocated for hospitals and clinics. But buried inside the budget is a freeze on hiring new doctors and nurses. So, what good are buildings without people to run them? Education? The headlines shout, free education, but the budget quietly slashes funding for teacher training and school materials. Classrooms may be free, but overcrowded and under-resourced. Agriculture? Promises of fertilizer support sound impressive. But behind closed doors, the numbers shrink. Many small-scale farmers will be left waiting, or abandoned entirely. And in a country where hunger still bites, that silence is deadly. And here's the bigger question, who decides where to cut, and why? Because the pattern is clear. The flashy sectors, the ones that bring headlines and applause, get the spotlight. The invisible ones, the services ordinary Zambians depend on daily, are sacrificed. It's a cruel trade-off. And most citizens never know until it's too late. Some critics whisper that these cuts aren't accidents. They say the government is shifting money toward projects that benefit elites, allies, and foreign creditors, not the ordinary people in Lusaka, Ndola, or Chipata. But if that's true, what happens next? Can a nation survive when the very foundations, healthcare, education, farming, are weakened in silence? Because here's the hidden danger: today's silent cuts may create tomorrow's loud crisis. And that's exactly why the Lungu family fears this budget too. Because those same cuts could also be used to target them politically, by shifting the narrative away from state spending, and onto their past. Stay with us, because in the next episode, Debt Chains, we'll expose the secret strings tied to Zambia's K253 billion budget, and how powerful foreign creditors may be the ones quietly pulling them. Debt Chains. Zambia's K253 billion budget sounds bold, ambitious, even historic. But behind the applause, behind the promises, lies a truth many fear to say out loud: this budget is not entirely Zambia's. Because much of the money is already spoken for. For every kwacha allocated to schools or hospitals, another kwacha is swallowed by debt repayments. China, the World Bank, private lenders, they all loom in the background. And they don't forgive easily. The numbers are staggering. Billions owed. Interest piling up. Repayment deadlines approaching. And here's the catch: Zambia cannot escape these chains without making promises in return. Promises that shape the very heart of this budget. That's why some critics say this is not a Zambian budget at all. It's a lender's budget. Crafted in Lusaka, yes, but approved in Beijing, Washington, and London. And if that's true, who is really in control? Because here's what the fine print suggests: debt conditions quietly demand sacrifices. Cuts in subsidies. Limits on public hiring. Privatizations whispered under the radar. Moves that please creditors, but squeeze ordinary Zambians. But the story doesn't end there. These debt chains also have a political side. The Lungu family knows it well. During Edgar Lungu's rule, Zambia borrowed heavily, leaving scars that still bleed today. Now, HH's government uses that legacy to justify today's painful deals. But the question is this accountability, or revenge dressed as economics? For ordinary Zambians, the consequences are the same. Higher taxes, rising costs, and a government with less room to breathe. And here's the darkest twist: once you're trapped in debt, freedom is an illusion. Every new budget looks bold. Every new speech sounds powerful. But in truth, the nation is already bound. Bound by contracts signed long ago. So, is HH steering Zambia toward recovery? Or is he simply tightening the chains that already exist? Because if Zambia can't break free, then this K253 billion budget may not be a symbol of strength at all, but proof of how weak the nation's independence has become. Stay with us, because in the next episode, The Ghost of Lungu, we'll uncover how this budget may quietly reopen wounds from Edgar Lungu's rule, and why the family now fears their past could come back to haunt them. The Ghost of Lungu. Every budget tells a story. But Zambia's K253 billion budget carries a shadow, the shadow of Edgar Lungu. Because hidden inside the allocations are not just figures and projects, but reminders of a past the government refuses to forget. During Lungu's presidency, billions vanished into questionable contracts, inflated road projects, and mysterious offshore accounts. At least, that's what critics allege. And now, HH's government is using this new budget to shine a light back on those ghosts. Look closely, and you'll see it. Extra funds directed toward investigative wings. Quiet allocations for anti-corruption drives. Money earmarked for financial intelligence units. On paper, it looks like reform. In reality, it may be the beginning of a political storm. Because while HH frames it as accountability, the Lungu family sees something else: a trap. Esther Lungu and her children know that reopening past investigations could expose everything they've tried to shield. Their wealth, their properties, their influence. And that's why, for them, this budget isn't just economics. It's survival. But here's where it gets darker. Whispers say some allocations may even be designed specifically to weaken the Lungu dynasty, choking their businesses, funding their rivals, and ensuring they can never rise again. So, is this budget really about national growth? Or is it a carefully crafted political weapon? The irony is painful. The very debt crisis Zambia faces today began under Lungu's watch. And now, HH is using that legacy to justify policies that could bury the family politically. It's as if Lungu's ghost is haunting not just his family, but the entire nation. But here's the question that lingers: if justice is truly the goal, why does it feel so personal? For ordinary Zambians, the fear is that this budget is less about healing and more about settling scores. And if that's true, then what happens when politics overshadows progress? Because the Ghost of Lungu is not just about the past. It's about the future, a future where Zambia must choose between accountability and revenge. Stay with us, because in the next episode, The Money Maze, we'll uncover how flashy projects in this budget may hide a web of contracts, tenders, and secret beneficiaries feeding off the nation's biggest spending plan ever. The Money Maze. Every kwacha in Zambia's K253 billion budget has a destination. Roads, energy, agriculture. Big projects that shine in headlines. To the public, it feels like progress. But behind the scenes, those billions enter a maze where not all money finds its way to the people. Because here's the truth, in Zambia, contracts are power. Every road built, every dam constructed, every school refurbished comes with tenders worth millions. And those tenders rarely go to chance. They flow to allies, friends, and insiders, the chosen few with connections in government. This is the Money Maze. A system where flashy projects become feeding grounds. Take infrastructure. On paper, it's a win, better roads, faster trade, modern cities. But dig deeper, and you'll find inflated costs. A road worth K100 million suddenly costs K300 million. Where does the extra money go? Straight into the pockets of companies tied to the powerful. Agriculture, too, hides its own maze. Subsidies and fertilizer deals that look generous often end up controlled by middlemen. Farmers in villages wait for support, while businessmen in Lusaka grow rich. And then there's energy. Billions are promised for new power projects, yet Zambians still face blackouts. Why? Because the money disappears into contracts given to firms that deliver little, but collect a lot. Here's the chilling part, once money enters the maze, it's almost impossible to trace. Audits are slow, investigations stall, and accountability vanishes. But what makes this budget different is the scale. At K253 billion, the maze is larger than ever before. And the stakes? Even higher. Critics whisper that this isn't just about development, it's about rewarding loyalty. Allies are fed, rivals are starved, and ordinary Zambians? They are left with promises while elites feast on projects they may never see completed. And yet, here's the cruel twist, many citizens cheer these projects, not knowing the true cost. The ribbon-cutting ceremonies hide the truth, that Zambia may be paying 3 times over for progress that only half arrives. So the question remains, is this budget a vision of growth, or a maze designed to enrich the few? Stay with us, because in the next episode, The Price of Power, we'll reveal how this budget could define HH's legacy, and why the same numbers that promise hope could also destroy both him and the Lungu dynasty. The Price of Power. Zambia's K253 billion budget is more than numbers. More than projects. More than promises. It is a test of leadership, a test of loyalty, a test of survival. For President Hakainde Hichilema, this budget is his legacy. If it works, history may remember him as the man who rebuilt Zambia from crisis. But if it fails, it could brand him as just another leader trapped by debt, corruption, and broken promises. And here's the paradox, the bigger the budget, the bigger the risk. Because hidden within this bold spending plan are dangers that could crush HH's political future. If the projects stall, if the debts grow, if ordinary Zambians see no change in their daily lives, the backlash will be swift. Meanwhile, for the Lungu family, they are just as high. This budget could quietly reopen old wounds, revive investigations, and strip away what power and influence they still hold. To them, the K253 billion plan feels like a weapon aimed at their survival. But here's the deeper truth, the real price of this budget will not be paid in parliament, or by elites. It will be paid by ordinary Zambians. The farmer waiting for fertilizer. The mother hoping for medicine in the clinic. The child crammed into an overcrowded classroom. They are the ones who will feel the silent cuts. They are the ones trapped in the debt chains. They are the ones lost inside the money maze. And yet, there is a cruel irony. Both HH and the Lungus fight for power using this budget as their battleground. But while they clash, the people watch and wait. So, is this K253 billion plan truly the start of Zambia's recovery? Or will it become the bill that no one can afford to pay? Because in the end, every kwacha spent carries a cost. And that cost, the price of power, may be far greater than anyone imagines. Stay with us, because in our next series, we'll uncover the shocking truth behind Zambia's secret deals with foreign creditors, and reveal who really owns the future of this nation.